They say Rome has two lives, one in the sun and one under stone. For 100 years, the second life of the Capitoline Hills slept behind bricked doors and sealed stairwells, a place that existed only in rumors and maintenance maps. Now engineers and archaeologists are prying it open again. This is the story of the Grottino del Campidoglio, the tunnel city Rome tried to forget. Stand in the square Michelangelo designed on top of the Capitoline and look around. Marble emperors, palaces turned into museums, the city spreading out in every direction. It feels complete, but beneath your feet the hill is hollowed like a hive. Galleries run in long, straight cuts, then bend, then stack over one another, a honeycomb carved from volcanic tuff. If you could peel back the pavement, you'd see strata of human problem-solving. How to quarry stone, how to store water, how to keep wine cool, how to make a living in the margins when the city above was too hot, too crowded, or too dangerous. The first cuts were practical. Ancient builders quarried the Capitoline the way a mason slices a loaf. Parallel pick marks still score the walls where blocks were pried loose and dragged upward to feed Rome's appetite for monuments. When the best stone was gone, the empty spaces didn't stay empty. Cisterns were bricked and plastered to hold precious rainwater. Cool chambers became cellars. Narrow lanes between quarry pillars were shored with brickwork and turned into small workshops and storerooms. If you listen to the archaeologists who work down there now, they call it a palimpsest. One use scratched over another and another, a script of survival written in dust and mortar. For centuries, the underground thrived in a quiet, humble way. In hot months, the temperature stayed kind to wine and grain. Rings still set into the walls suggest that animals were tethered here. Maybe mules used to haul barrels and amphorae. A few passages likely opened directly into the backs of shops that faced the Forum, a hidden logistics chain feeding the public face of the city. In later periods, there are hints of taverns, too, low-ceilinged rooms with soot on the vaults and drain holes cut into the paving, informal places that never made it into the guidebooks upstairs. Then the 1920s arrived, and with them a new Rome, one built as much from ideology as from stone. Mussolini wanted long, triumphal sightlines and a sanitized narrative. The messy, makeshift underworld beneath the Capitoline didn't fit the image. Entrances were bricked up, lifts and stairways were closed, maps were redrawn. The Grottino was not erased. Erasures are impossible in Rome, but it was pushed from public memory. In World War II, some stretches served briefly as shelters. After the sirens fell silent, the hill's undercity exhaled, and the city above forgot to breathe it in again. For most of a century, the Grottino sat in that engineered silence. Maintenance crews knew certain corridors as utilities. Conservators made occasional structural checks. But the larger story, the sense of a connected, layered complex, remained entombed by policy and dust. Ask people who grew up here, and many will tell you they never heard the name, never knew there were doors behind doors beneath their morning commute. Why open it now? Because the tools finally exist to do it without destroying it, and because the city decided the time had come to admit the underground into the official story of Rome. The project currently underway is as modern as the tunnels are ancient. Laser scanners mapping each gallery point by point, structural engineers wrapping tired pillars in discrete reinforcement, environmental systems pulling radon out and pushing safe air in. The plan is simple and radical at once. Stabilize, document, ventilate, then allow the public to enter on guided routes, in controlled numbers, with the same respect you'd bring to a museum and the same caution you'd bring to a cave. Walk with me down one of the reopened stairs. The air cools quickly. Your voice flattens against stone. The beam of your lamp catches the old pick marks in the wall. The rhythm of the cuts tells you more about the person who swung the tool than any inscription could. A turn to the left, a narrowing, a low arch of brick where someone shored a weak spot in the 19th century, and then a long, straight run where light puddles every 10 meters on the floor. If you kneel and look close, the floor isn't smooth. It's patched and repatched with materials from different centuries. A slice of opus spiccatum here, a modern concrete fix there, mortal layers like tree rings. Labels will eventually stand where archaeologists are working now, but even without them you can read the space. This chamber was once a cistern. The plaster is waterproofing, the plaster under that is older waterproofing, and the curved lip cut into the wall is where a pipe once drew water off to somewhere else. That low room beside it? See the blackening on the vault? A charcoal hearth lived here. The vent hole still carries a stub of ceramic flue. Next door, cut into the same ridge, a storage space with 2 heavy iron rings anchored at waist height. Imagine a mule tied there, snorting steam in the cool, while someone stacks amphorae in the dark. The teams say they're finding small worlds every day. A shard here that carries the stamp of an oil producer, a broken amphora with residue that tests positive for wine, the door leaf of a wartime latrine with the word gabinetto still stenciled in flaking paint. None of it is the sort of treasure that stops a museum guard in her tracks. But together, it's a kind of treasure Rome rarely displays. Proof that a city is not just built by emperors, but kept alive by people you never learn the names of. The challenge is making a place like this safe without sealing it again under a different excuse. Rock breathes. Mortar ages. Air pools in dead corners and brings radon with it. Too much ventilation dries out ancient plaster and turns dust into scouring wind. Too little and you risk visitors' lungs. The current plan is a compromise that treats the Grottino as a living organism, monitored constantly, visited gently. Guided tours in small groups, pauses in places where the environment needs to recover, routes that can be shifted if a gallery shows stress. The goal is not to turn the underground into a theme park, but to make it a classroom where the subject is how cities survive their own weight. There's an ethical question here, too. Which version of the Grottino are we about to show? The Roman quarry? The medieval cistern? The early modern cellar? The 19th century workshop? The wartime shelter? Every layer wants the spotlight. Every layer shadows another. The team's answer is to show the palimpsest honestly. Highlight the quarry marks, point out the plaster, preserve the soot, and leave certain modern scars visible so visitors can see that history is not a stack of pristine slices, but a stew. In one corner, a little panel of brickwork will be left without cosmetic smoothing so people can count repairs. In another, a rib of tuff will remain scabbed where a crude reinforcement once bit into it, because even bad repairs are part of the story. Myth will meet measurement down here. You will hear dramatic claims from people who want numbers more than they want nuance. The hill hollowed to impossible depths, secret tunnels racing off to the sea, a span of caverns big enough to park a stadium. The truth doesn't need inflation. What matters is not how many meters down you go, but how many centuries are stacked in one glance. A room can be small and still hold 1,000 years of evidence. A corridor can be short and still connect the politics of a dictator to the pragmatism of a tavern keeper and the geometry of a Roman engineer. Which brings us back to the ceiling. Why shut this underground world away in the first place? Partly for safety. Loose stone does not care about romance. But partly for narrative control. Regimes shape memory as aggressively as they shape avenues. The Third Rome, promoted by the 1920s, needed grand, clean surfaces. The underground was an embarrassment, proof of improvisation and poverty and the city's refusal to behave as a tidy museum. Sealing the doors wasn't just a practical act. It was an attempt to tidy the past. Reopening them is a different kind of decision. It says Rome is allowed to be complicated. It is permitted to show the pipes under its statues. It can be glorious and grubby at the same time. When you walk these galleries, you start to understand the Eternal City not as a marble postcard, but as a machine, one that wasted very little, that reused until reuse became culture, that carried water and wine and people through the same cold air because survival favored thrift over pride. What will you actually see when the tours begin? Think less of a single spectacular cavern and more of a route. 20 minutes here, 10 there, through rooms that feel intensely specific. A quarry gallery with parallel pick scars running shoulder-high like a score on sheet music. A plastered cistern with a patched leak the size of your hand. A workspace barely wider than your arms, with a shadow of soot just above head height where a lantern hung for years. A wartime passage where the paint is different because it had to be seen by candle and fear. Occasional small exhibits placed where they make sense instead of where they'd photograph best. A shelf with amphora fragments near a former storage niche. A single forged ring at its original height to show where a mule stood. It won't be theatrical. The light will be practical and kind to stone. The interpretive signs will explain more than they dramatize. There will be places where you can stand still and just breathe, in cool air that smells faintly of wet dust, and hear the city muffled above you. Bus breaks 2 worlds away, a distant fountain, a change in the crowd when a tour group crosses the square. Down here, the city feels like a creature, circulatory, respiratory, sensitive to pressure. Outside, in the upper exhibit, models and plans will fill in the gaps, how galleries interlock, where the old entrances were, how modern engineers threaded life safety systems through old rock without lying about it. There will be photographs of the ceiling in the 1920s, photographs of the wartime years, and photographs taken last week of a conservator's gloved hand tracing a crack. You will be invited to look at the underground not as a rumor, but as evidence. The opening will not be the end of a story. It will be the beginning of a long, slow conversation between a city and its past. And there will be a last door. Every project like this has one. The door that stays closed until the engineers are satisfied that the stone behind it will hold and the air beyond it will keep you. It might be an old brick arch with a neat modern lintel added above it. It might be a dented wartime slab, painted a bureaucratic green that no longer exists above ground. When that door finally swings, 100 years of engineered silence will end with a small sound, hinges, breath, a footstep. When you come back up into the light, the Capitoline will look the same. That is Rome's greatest illusion.
Everything changes. Everything remains.
On the surface, the city keeps its theater. Underneath, the machine keeps running. The Grottino del Campidoglio is proof that the most extraordinary things here are not always dramatic. Sometimes the miracle is that a city can use the same space 10 different ways over 2,000 years, and leave enough behind for us to read the whole script. Rome did not survive by being tidy. It survived by being layered, by learning to live on top of itself. If you listen when the tour ends and the door closes behind you, you may hear the underground take a breath, the kind a sleeper takes when someone opens a window. The second life of the Capitoline is awake again, and the city above is a little more honest because of it.